Evening to those of you just joining us. You're watching Sky News, and the breaking news tonight: Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty of recruiting underage girls to be sexually abused by Jeffrey Epstein. The 60-year-old former socialite and ex-girlfriend of billionaire financier Epstein is now facing the prospect of years in prison. Well, let's just show you that live shot in New York. We're expecting to hear from the Maxwell family due to give a statement, we believe. As soon as that comes through, we shall take you straight back to New York. In the meantime, let's speak to the journalist Daphne Barrack. She interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell from prison and joins me now on the phone. Daphne, I understand you've been in contact with Ghislaine today, is that right?
I was actually texting back and forth to her lawyer, and she was with her at the cell. When the jury were deliberating, Ghislaine was put in a cell in a lower level of the court, and the lawyers were going in and out, and so basically we were sending messages to each other, and she sent me a message how stressful it is to, of course, sit and wait. I mean, we can just imagine, right? But I must tell you that they did not see that coming. I mean, I usually, as an interviewer, I keep my opinion to myself, but the family of Ghislaine felt that she would be acquitted. They were having arrangements to whisk her out of court to a private place. And by the way, I'm not saying it to ridicule them. I totally commend each sibling to standing there for her sister, which is such a toxic case, and you could not ask for a sibling to be more loyal to the sister, and they did the right thing. And maybe this kind of delusional saved them, but they were really preparing for an acquittal, and I just listened. I didn't say anything because they love the sister, they care for her, and also it affected their business and their family because, as you know, quote unquote, guilty by association. So that's probably a huge shock for them. With all the preparations that only I and few others are aware of her big acquittal, it's a huge shock for them, and just you could just imagine, right?
Did you get an insight as to why they were so convinced that she would be acquitted?
I think they felt that the prosecution was weak, and many people felt that way. But I think they, again, as an interviewer, I'm the interviewer of the CBS series, Paramount Plus, Ghislaine 4 Hours, which is also ITV in your case. Prime time. I would not say my own opinion, but I think they felt that because the prosecution was so weak, in their opinion, there's nothing there. But as many attorneys, and I'm sure Sky News attorneys would tell you, the prosecution was not there to prove that Ghislaine Maxwell abused the accuser. They were just there to show that she was a complicit. She knew or she helped, and because there was a woman involved, it gave the 14 years old or the other minors more confidence because there was a woman there. And I think that was a misunderstanding of the siblings. Again, they love their sister. I commend them for being there for her because they were not close for years. They live in different some live in America, some live in UK. They've done everything they could. But I think they misjudged the situation. And they did. They spent some money recently about security and preparing an apartment for her and everything if she's acquitted. And they spent money. They really believed that she would be acquitted. And so you understand the shock, right?
Were you able to glean the demeanour of Ghislaine herself?
I beg your pardon?
Were you able to understand the demeanour of Ghislaine herself, her attitude towards the proceedings?
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, we have been communicating through the most closest people, and first of all, she's very weak. I mean, one thing I have to say. Until 2 hours ago, Ghislaine was presumed innocent before, unless she's proven guilty. Now she's guilty. So I have a big problem with we America, and I'm a very proud American, putting people in such harsh conditions. And even if convicted, I mean, come on, are we Pakistan or one of these terrible countries that put people? Why are we putting a rat in a sewer and depriving her from food? It doesn't make sense, okay? So that's one thing. But she was very weak in the trial, and since there were no cameras in the trial, as you know, because it was a federal court, unlike O.J. Simpson, right? So people didn't know that she was sleeping most of the trial because she was sleep deprived. They got her, they woke her up at 3 a.m. in the morning, shackled her, got her into the cell in court, then got her there. So she was sleeping, and I was thinking, by the way, just as juror looking at her, she's sleeping as if she's uninterested. It wasn't that she is not interested. She was just sleep deprived. So she's not in good health. She's of course in mental bad health, and I don't know how that. Because I know the family was really preparing for an acquittal, that must have been a shock not only for the family but for herself. So my last communication with her and her lawyers in the cell, just maybe 30 minutes before, was that it's extremely stressful. Right now, probably she would she would welcome another stressful few days, right? But she didn't know.
Throughout your communications with her via her lawyer, was there ever any mention made of the victims?
First of all, the interview that you saw, the CBS series, which is coming in February, and with the siblings and everything, and the interview we saw with the front page of the Mail on Sunday was never through her lawyer. It was me and Ghislaine, and we are never going to discuss how come. So just to clarify it. But this afternoon I communicated with her lawyers, yes. And about the victims, because don't forget there is a gag order, we had to be very careful. So we couldn't really discuss, if you remember the bombshell interview on the Mail on Sunday, which also used for the CBS series at ITV, it was more about the way she's been held, which is quite extraordinary regarding human rights. And again, I don't say anything about what she did since she was found guilty. For me, anybody which does sex abuse or sex trafficking to underage, and also for not underage, and of course should be harshly punished. But that's the idea. Now, as for I did ask for the CBS series. I asked Ghislaine Maxwell, and that was a moment, and you'll see it in the CBS Paramount Plus series and ITV New Place, that I asked him, hey, Ian, if instead of me was one of the accusers, what would you say? And the room, all our crews, the room, like you could hear a pin dropping, and he took time to think about it. He did come with a good answer. He was very sympathetic for them. He just tried to say, well, it's not my sister. My sister is not Epstein. But I think right now the narrative is changing because of the verdict, right?
Just to remind viewers that we are expecting to hear from the Maxwell family. That shot on the side of your screens, the steps outside the court in New York. Daphne, I wonder if you can tell us whether...
Can I just tell you what will come? Can I just predict what will come? Kevin Maxwell told me in his first sit-down interview he saw CBS, Paramount Plus, and ITV with me. And he did say, because I said to him, Kevin, what if he vouched that they will put everything they have to appeal and appeal and appeal until all avenues are closed. So I would think, I'm just predicting because that's what he told us on CBS, and the series is coming only in a few weeks, but I'm just telling you, I'm just giving you a hint, that's their state of mind. They will go and appeal and appeal and appeal until all avenues are closed.
And on what grounds would those appeals be? Were you able to discuss that at all?
He just told me, Kevin and Ian were acquitted in a very big lawsuit in UK, which is their late father stole the pensions of elderly people, which was crazy. So he said, Daphne, not everybody who is convicted is really guilty, and we're going to fight all the way. We're going to put all the money, all the resources. We're going to fight until the end. So what's the ground? I think they will have to go right now to a different set of lawyers, which are appeal lawyers, and find a case to appeal. That's a very good question. I commend you on that. You cannot just go and appeal. You have to appeal based on something. And the fact that the jury is all unanimous about these 5 counts finding her guilty would make it difficult. Also, the fact that the jurors took a lot of time, right? So nobody can say they were rushing through. So,
Daphne.
but look, I just commend him as a brother,
Daphne Barrick, thank you very much for speaking to us. Daphne Barrick, a journalist who has interviewed Ghislaine Maxwell from prison and spoke with her, was in touch via her lawyer a few hours ago. We are looking at the steps outside the court in New York. Our correspondent Martha Kellner is still outside. Martha, we're still waiting to hear, as I understand, from the Maxwell family. Microphones set up and crowds outside waiting to hear from the Maxwell family on the steps of the court. Is that still the situation?
Yeah, still waiting for the possible arrival of the Maxwell siblings. As I mentioned earlier, 3 of Ghislaine Maxwell's siblings have been in court today. A brother, Kevin, and twin sisters, Isabel and Christine. They're a fair amount older than Ghislaine Maxwell. She's at 60 years old, the youngest of 9 Maxwell siblings, 7 of whom are surviving. So I would expect it's most likely that Kevin will address the media in the absence of another Maxwell brother, Ian, who seems to have taken on the role of unofficial Maxwell family spokesperson during this trial. As a reminder, the prosecution case here, a case which has achieved guilty verdicts on 5 of the 6 counts of which Ghislaine Maxwell was accused, hinged around the testimony of the 4 women accusers who took the stand. Women now, grown women now, but at the time teenagers and very young women who say they were vulnerable when they found themselves ensnared by Ghislaine Maxwell into her and Jeffrey Epstein's web. 3 of those women testified anonymously, or rather 2 testified anonymously. 1 testified using only her first name. But one of those 4 women waived her anonymity. Annie Farmer, an American woman, says that when she was 16 years old, she was flown to Jeffrey Epstein's sprawling ranch in New Mexico. She said she expected to go there as part of a scholarship program and for other young girls to be there with her. She says when she arrived, she was utterly isolated on that ranch with only Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. She said that Ghislaine Maxwell instructed her how to give a massage to Jeffrey Epstein. She said that Jeffrey Epstein crawled into bed with her one morning and pressed himself up against her. She said she was traumatised by that event. And her attorney, her lawyer, Sigrid McCauley, has released a statement in the last few minutes on behalf of Annie Farmer. I'll just read you that statement now. She says, "Today's verdict is a towering victory, not just for the brave women who testified in this trial, but for the women around the world whose young and tender lives were diminished and damaged by the abhorrent actions of Ghislaine Maxwell. For too long, their voices were ignored and discounted and their characters disgraced, but no more. I'm in awe of their sacrifice, their courage and the strength they have shown in pursuit of justice. Today's verdict makes clear that those who prey upon and traffic minors are committing serious crimes punishable under the law. Ghislaine Maxwell has been held accountable and justice has been done." Ghislaine Maxwell facing very probably the rest of her life in prison after being convicted of 5 of the 6 charges against her, including that most serious sex trafficking charge, which has a maximum tariff of 40 years in prison. Prosecutors haven't said yet whether they intend to try Maxwell on 2 remaining perjury counts against her. On the defence's request, they were separated from the 6 charges that were heard in this trial. We've also just received through a statement from a lawyer, Jack Scarola, who represented another of the victims who testified under only her first name, Carolyn. She was the woman, then a girl, a 14-year-old girl, who says on 100 occasions or more she went to Jeffrey Epstein's Palm Beach mansion and was sexually abused. Her lawyer said on her behalf, "The conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell is a welcome confirmation of the veracity of the charges brought against her on behalf of the very brave young women whom she directly participated in abusing. On behalf of the women I have been privileged to represent over the past decade, I thank the prosecutors of the US Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York for their unwavering dedication to achieving justice in this case, and I express my confidence in their continued dedication. Satisfaction with Maxwell's conviction is tempered by the knowledge that other co-conspirators have yet to be held responsible for their involvement in Jeffrey Epstein's extraordinary criminal enterprise." That is an important point to note. There were other names mentioned in this trial alongside Ghislaine Maxwell, other people who the women accusers in this case and in other civil cases have said that were involved in ensnaring them, in bringing them into the dastardly web of Jeffrey Epstein. Other co-conspirators who those alleged victims say have yet to be brought to justice. We are also waiting to hear from the Maxwell family. We've heard from Kevin, her brother, who's in court today on one other occasion during this trial. He said, or he took the opportunity of having the media in front of him on that occasion to complain about what he said were brutalising conditions at the Brooklyn Metropolitan Detention Centre, where Ghislaine Maxwell has spent the past 18 months of her life. He said that she's been brought to court here in Manhattan across the Brooklyn Bridge. He said she's been brought to court with shackles around her ankles, which have left her bruised and bleeding. He also says that she has been given inadequate provisions to sustain her through the day. Sometimes, he said, just a mouldy boiled egg. Ghislaine Maxwell clearly facing many more years in prison in America. She's 60 years old now. She actually turned 60 years old on Christmas Day in that prison in Brooklyn. She will spend many more milestone birthdays, very probably the rest of her life in prison. Just also a reaction from Virginia Giuffre, who's one of the most prominent accusers of Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. Virginia Giuffre says she was trafficked around the world by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein. She says that on 3 occasions she was forced to have sexual contact with Prince Andrew, charges that he denies. But she's been responding to these 5 guilty verdicts for Ghislaine Maxwell. She says, "My soul yearned for justice for years, and today the jury gave me just that. I will remember this day always. Having lived with the horrors of Maxwell's abuse, my heart goes out to the many other young girls and young women who suffered at her hands and whose lives she destroyed. I hope that today is not the end, but rather another step in justice being served. Maxwell did not act alone. Others must be held accountable. I have faith that they will be." There is also an outstanding civil case from Virginia Giuffre against Prince Andrew. OK, we've just had pictures coming through of Kevin Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's brother, leaving court apparently through the rear entrance of this courthouse. There's 2 entrances to the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. One, clearly the main official entrance, the rather grand steps leading to that front door. There's also a side entrance which...
We're going to be making a statement later this evening. Thank you very much.
Where will that be?
Watch your backs, guys.
Where will that statement be? We have microphones set up out front.
It's going to be issued on 8 p.m.
Can I go? Can I go? Yeah, I'm dipping out to go try get in.
So Martha still in New York for us. We just heard there from Ian Maxwell regarding making a statement. We are still expecting the family to make a statement this evening on the fact that their sister has been found guilty on 5 of 6 counts in this trial. We heard previously from a journalist who spoke to Ghislaine Maxwell in the past few hours via her
Do you want to
lawyer.
see my card?
And from her, we glean that the family fully expected for her to be acquitted. So this verdict, the verdicts that have come in, the 5 guilty verdicts, are a complete shock to the family this evening. While we wait for them to come forward and give a full statement, we can speak now to Lisa Bloom, I believe, who's a lawyer who's represented several of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Good evening to you. Your reaction to the verdicts this evening?
Fighting for a long time for justice for these clients.
Sorry, Lisa, just to cut in, we missed the top of what you were saying there because of the sound. So just if you can start again with your reaction to the verdicts.
Sure. We are moved to tears. I've been in communication with the 8 Jeffrey Epstein victims who I represent, whose lives were destroyed by this man. I don't represent any of the brave 4 accusers who testified in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial, but we are so appreciative of what they did and the courage that they showed. And she is now convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, brought to justice for what she did. She had 60 years of freedom walking this earth. May she never have another day of freedom again. We hope she spends the rest of her life behind bars.
It takes an enormous amount of courage for women, they were girls at the time, to come forward and reopen a case like this and give evidence. We have heard tonight that this will give others potentially the courage to come forward and speak on cases such as this.
There's no question about it. And I've already been in contact with other clients of mine who are sexual abuse accusers against other high-profile men. And they say this gives them the courage to continue their fights for justice. These fights take a long time. Nobody wants to go into court and talk about the most humiliating experiences of their lives. Nobody wants to be cross-examined for hour after hour, as the 4 accusers in Ghislaine Maxwell's trial were. But they did it, and they did it for one reason: to get justice. And now they have gotten it. And I hope they are all walking a little taller today and feeling the love that so many people are sending out to them for the courage and what they showed, because we got some justice today.
You've represented several of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Have you been able to speak to any of them this evening?
Yes, and they are just delighted. They are thrilled. I mean, look, it's very sad what Ghislaine Maxwell did. And, we don't, it's very sad that she's going to spend probably the rest of her life in prison. But she brought it on herself. She did this, I want to emphasize, not just one day, not just 1 week or 1 month, but year after year after year. In this case, there were 10 years of allegations from the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. She had choice points every day, every month, to stop bringing girls to Jeffrey Epstein to be sexually abused. And she chose to keep doing it. Why? The prosecutors said for money, because she lived an incredibly wealthy and lavish lifestyle with Jeffrey Epstein on his 10,000-acre ranch in New Mexico, on his private island, in his $50 million home in New York, in the Paris apartment. She got to have that life. And in exchange, she brought girls to him, girls whose lives were ruined. So that's what happened. That's what the jury found. And we're very pleased that they did.
Were you always fully confident that this would be the result, that it would be such a unanimous verdict? I know that trials, in federal trials, verdicts have to be unanimous, but 5 of the 6 counts.
No, I was not confident this was what was going to happen. I believed that this was the most likely outcome, that this was the just and fair outcome. I was in the courthouse for the whole first week and saw the testimony and followed it very closely after that. I believed this was the only correct outcome. But you never know when a trial happens. I tried many cases myself. Sometimes they end the right way. Sometimes there's a mistrial. And as the deliberations wore on into the second week, we were definitely getting concerned. So we had no reason to be concerned. As it turns out, the jury was very carefully going over the transcripts of all the testimony. We know from their questions that they took their job very seriously. They stuck to the evidence, they stuck to the law, and they came to this outcome.
And it was quite a complex trial. We know that it's 83-page long charge sheet, much for the jury to go through. And as you say, they did ask for more transcripts to go through meticulously the evidence. They have taken their time and they have deliberated for quite a while, but it was quite a complex issue.
Yes, they asked for Post-it notes and highlighters of different colors and other supplies. I mean, one can only imagine what they had these notes and they put them up on the wall and they were, arrows and strings like we see in crime dramas. I mean, is that what they were doing? I think they were very carefully going through the evidence and the transcripts. In the last day or two, they asked for defense testimony transcripts of the memory expert, for example, who said that the victim's memories could not be believed. That's a woman named Elizabeth Loftus, who I've been up against in many of my cases. I hope she retires now because she always comes in and testifies that sexual abuse survivors should not be believed. So they really went over everything. They were very careful. They took their time. They, recessed over the Christmas weekend. They probably thought about it a lot over that weekend. They came back this week and they got the job done and we got justice.
During the case, the defence tried to make the case that Ghislaine Maxwell was being used as a scapegoat for Jeffrey Epstein, but the prosecution, in their closing arguments, were saying that she was a partner in crime to Epstein who knew exactly what she was doing.
Well, that's right. From the beginning of their opening statement, the defense said that since the time of Adam and Eve, women have been blamed for the bad acts of men. And I thought that was a good start on their part. The problem is that there was so much evidence tying Ghislaine herself to these crimes, that it wasn't just Jeffrey Epstein and she happened to be sort of around or in the house. She was the one who was luring these girls in, having them over for tea, charming them, showing them how to massage Jeffrey Epstein, which massages turned into disgusting acts of sexual abuse, normalizing the behavior, sometimes participating in the sexual abuse herself. So ultimately, that defense theory was never proven. And instead, the prosecution showed that she was an active participant in these crimes.
Lisa, stay with us. I just want to bring in a tweet from Virginia Giuffre. She said, "My soul yearned for justice for years, and today the jury gave me just that. I will remember this day always. Having lived with the horrors of Maxwell's abuse, my heart goes out to the many other girls and young women who suffered at her hands and whose lives she destroyed. I hope that today is not the end, but rather another step in justice being served. Maxwell did not act alone. Others must be held accountable. I have faith that they will be." And Lisa, that points to the next question, that this seems to be far from over, that others might yet be implicated.
Well, that's right. And Virginia herself is not just hoping, but she's making that happen because she's filed a lawsuit against Prince Andrew, who she says sexually abused her. Now, he denies that. That is the subject of a civil case, which she has filed and which she and her attorneys are fighting here in the U.S. And I think anyone who was connected with Jeffrey Epstein, who either participated in sexual abuse or helped him by way of sending girls to him, trafficking, etc., should be very concerned today about this verdict against Ghislaine Maxwell.
Bring us up to date where we are with the case against Prince Andrew now.
Well, it's been filed and it's been served after various attempts on his part to duck service. Eventually, the court said, you've been served, let's move forward. He's now trying to get the case thrown out on some technical grounds. He says that Virginia is not a resident of the United States. She's really a resident of Australia, and therefore the case should not be heard here. You know, he seems to be doing everything he can to avoid having the case being decided on the merits, hoping to get it thrown out on technical grounds. And so we'll see what the judge does.
Well, what is the likelihood, though, of that case being thrown out because of her not being a resident of the United States?
Well, I mean, it's always possible. She says that she has residency in the state of Colorado. I don't know the details of that. I don't know how much time she spends here, but she has really outstanding attorneys who I assume have gone over all of this with her. So we will see. I certainly am rooting for her. I hope the case does go forward, and I hope it's decided on its merits so that her dispute against Prince Andrew and whether he sexually assaulted her can ultimately be decided once and for all by a jury.
Virginia Giuffre, in that statement on Twitter, said Maxwell did not act alone. Aside from the pursuit of a case against Prince Andrew, are there any other elements that you might be aware of?
Well, listen, there were a lot of people around Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. There were a lot of celebrity names that were mentioned in the trial. I want to emphasize they were not accused of sexual abuse in the trial, but names like Donald Trump and Bill Clinton and the actor Kevin Spacey and the actor Chris Tucker. The Senator John Glenn and former astronaut John Glenn. So a lot of prominent people, even the Pope. There was a picture of Ghislaine and Jeffrey with the Pope. So they certainly traveled in the highest circles of big names. And the girls, now women, testify that they were intimidated because of that. Again, we don't know if any of these others knew or were participants, but if they were, they should be very concerned.
We hear tonight that the family, via a third-party journalist who was communicating with Ghislaine Maxwell through a lawyer, that the family were fully expecting her to be acquitted and will more than likely be pushing for appeals. What do you make of that and the likely success of any appeals they might place, and on what possible grounds?
Listen, I have compassion for the family. I'm sure it's very difficult to have your sister be convicted of sex trafficking. I'm sure that's very hard on the family. But I have news for them. The likelihood of this getting reversed on appeal is slim. I think the judge did an excellent job. You have to find an error in the judge's ruling. And she has been very careful in her rulings. In fact, this judge is so good that she has just been elevated to the appellate court here from the trial court, which is a very prestigious kind of promotion for judges. So I don't think that's a concern. I just won 2 appeals in sexual harassment and sexual assault cases in California. We won a trial. The other side appealed. They have that right. We fought and we won this week and about a month ago, 2 appeals. It's very hard to win appeals. You have to show a very significant error. And, they can hope for that, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
Lisa, just sum up for us again what these verdicts mean to the victims, to those that you've represented.
My clients have been yearning for justice for decades, and that opportunity was taken away in 2019 when Jeffrey Epstein was allowed to kill himself in prison. Finally, we have justice against Ghislaine Maxwell. It means the world to my clients. She's had 60 years of freedom walking this earth. May she never walk free again.
Just to remind viewers, we just saw someone leaving the court. Her name was Leah Safam. She's a Maxwell family friend and has been supporting the family throughout the case. She just left the court, walking past the microphones that are expecting someone from the Maxwell family to come out and give a statement. We believe that they're due to do that, and we are hovering on pictures just outside the court. Still speaking to Lisa Bloom, a lawyer who's representing several of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. And you were just saying there, Lisa, what it actually means to those who have been directly affected.
Yes, it means the world. It's so important to get justice. You know, since we are small children, we say that's not fair, right? And as we grow up, we yearn for justice in a more sophisticated way. But it is a basic human need to get justice when there has been a profound wrong. And what is more wrong than the sexual abuse of little girls? Because let's remember, in this case, these girls were as young as 14 years old. That Ghislaine went to a summer camp for children and recruited and enticed these children and brought them to Jeffrey Epstein, where they were then sexually abused. That's what this trial was about. That's what she's convicted of. And so this is just a monumental day for justice as far as my clients and I are concerned.
Before the verdicts came in, we were looking at a range of sentencing up to 70 years in prison on the 6 counts. We now know that she's been found guilty on 5 of those 6 counts. So what range will we be looking at now in terms of the years that she might be spending in prison?
Well, it's almost that. I think it's up to about 60 years. I don't expect her to get that much because the judge has the choice of whether to sentence her consecutively or concurrently, which means for the 5 felonies that she's now been convicted of, will her sentences run all at the same time or will they be stacked? That's up to the judge. I hope that they are stacked. At age 60, if she's sentenced to, let's say, 30 years, it's highly likely that means it's the rest of her life in prison. And that's what we are looking for. That's what we are hoping for at the sentencing phase.
And life will mean life.
Yes, life generally does mean life. I mean, there's always the possibility that she could get out early, but it depends on how long the sentence is. What she's been convicted of are very serious crimes: conspiracy to commit sex trafficking itself, enticing and recruiting girls under the age of 17 for sexual acts. I mean, these are very serious crimes, and I'm sure that she will get a significant sentence in the decades.
I just want to remind viewers of a statement from attorney Jack Scarola, who represented the victim known as Carolyn. The statement reads, "The conviction of Ghislaine Maxwell is a welcome confirmation of the veracity of the charges brought against her on behalf of the very brave young women whom she directly participated in abusing. On behalf of the women I have been privileged to represent over the past decade, I thank the prosecutors of the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York for their unwavering dedication to achieving justice in this case, and I express my confidence in their continued dedication. Satisfaction with Maxwell's conviction is tempered by the knowledge that other co-conspirators have yet to be held responsible for their involvement in Jeffrey Epstein's extraordinary criminal enterprise. Doors closed by Epstein's death may be opened by the very strong motivation Maxwell now has to unlock every door to which she holds a key." And Lisa, we mentioned this briefly before, but this suggests that the sentencing today is not the end of these crimes.
Well, that's a very interesting statement about whether Ghislaine Maxwell will turn on others in exchange for a lighter sentence. The time for her to do that was before this trial. And at the time she was arrested, many speculated, will she turn on bigger names? I didn't think she would. I thought she was a big name in and of herself. And I suppose at this late date, she could still try. But I know from reading her deposition in some of the prior civil cases that she's quite arrogant. She always believed that she would get away with this. She did not want to answer questions. She felt that she knew more than the attorneys in the room about the law. Always a dangerous position to take. And I think that's why she did not testify in this trial. I don't know who's running the show, who's making the calls from her team. Is it her? Is it her attorneys? But if she thinks that at this late date she might turn on other people and give up bigger names, I guess she can give that a try. But I don't see it. I don't see that helping her at this late date.
And these verdicts are a warning that no matter how well connected or how high in society you move, that no one is above the law.
No one is above the law, and the wheels of justice may move slowly. They moved far too slowly in this case. The first police reports against Jeffrey Epstein were in 1996. Nevertheless, we did get justice today, and that is in large part because of the prosecutors, the FBI, of course, primarily the four accusers who agreed to testify and did testify, but is a huge team of people who made this possible, and they all worked together and they brought this home.
You say that from 1996, there were moves against Jeffrey Epstein and the wheels of justice moved perhaps far too slowly. Do you think that was because of exactly who he was?
Yes, and I think because girls are not believed, and they still are not believed. I represent many victims of sexual abuse against high-profile figures today. And we take them to the police today because I think that's important. And it's not just about money. And the police will take the report and then often do nothing. And frankly, shame on the Palm Beach police, who from 1996 had reports and did nothing about it. And after that, hundreds of girls and young women were abused by this couple. Had they acted in 1996, based on the reports of this teenage girl and others, so many lives of desperation could have been spared. And I hope that's a message for police now. Listen, we had a big investigation of the FBI recently in the case of many Olympic gymnasts who were sexually abused by a high-profile guy. And the FBI got a lot of reports and they did nothing. So that problem is not solved. But ultimately, we did get justice today against Ghislaine.
And why do you think it is that girls and women are not believed when reporting these types of crimes? And do you think that the perception of girls and women reporting these types of crimes, do you think that has now changed?
Sexism, misogyny. I think men are believed to be more credible than women and girls, which is obviously ridiculous. And money. There is a bias that people have that if somebody has a lot of money, that they're probably telling the truth. These biases still exist. There are a lot of myths about sexual abuse. People seem to think that it's like a purse snatching. You would go to the police immediately if you're sexually abused, even though we have mountains of research now to show that virtually everyone who is sexually abused waits a long time before they're able to come forward. And that's especially true for child victims. There was a wonderful expert named Lisa Rocchio who testified at Ghislaine's trial a few weeks ago, who explained this to the jury. Delayed reporting, delayed disclosure is very common. It is normal. It does not mean that the victims are lying. Some people take these secrets to their graves, which I think is very sad. Others take decades or years even to come forward. So the police would say to, well, why didn't you come to me a month ago? Why didn't you come to me a year ago? They look at these girls and they say, they come from the other side of the tracks. Some of them had drug problems, alcohol problems. They won't be believed. Instead of understanding, these are the kinds of victims that predators seek out. People from, troubled homes, people who have substance abuse problems, or substance abuse problems often follow sexual abuse. So we need a lot more education of law enforcement so they understand the issues about sexual abuse better so we can get these predators off the streets.
I wonder if you could speak to the bravery of these girls, now women, in coming forward.
It's almost a cliche at this point to talk about the bravery of these victims. I wish I could find better words to express it. It just takes unbelievable courage. I just ask everyone to think about the most humiliating secret of your life and then having to come forward and talk to strangers about it, not once, but over and over, to lawyers, to FBI investigators, to prosecutors, ultimately to come into court in front of a room full of strangers and to testify and then to be cross-examined about it. 99% of humanity would run in the other direction from that kind of experience. But why I love what I do is because I represent people every day, mostly women, who in fact do find the courage and who do come forward and who do testify. And I will tell you the good news, that after they testify, they feel empowered and they feel braver and they feel stronger. So I encourage people to do it, even though they're scared. We can do hard things. And when we do hard things, we get a lot sturdier. We get a lot stronger and able to do other hard things in our lives. And I suspect that's how those 4 very, very brave women who testified in this case are feeling tonight.
I just want to read the statement of Sigrid McCauley, the attorney for Annie Farmer, one of the victims in the trial. And she writes, today's verdict is a towering victory, not just for the brave women who testified in this trial, but for the women around the world whose young and tender lives were diminished and damaged by the abhorrent actions of Ghislaine Maxwell. For too long, their voices were ignored and discounted and their characters impugned and disgraced, but no more. I am in awe of their sacrifice, their courage and the strength they have shown in pursuit of justice. Today's verdict makes clear that those who prey upon and traffic minors are committing serious crimes punishable under the law. Ghislaine Maxwell has been held accountable and justice has been done. And that I would assume is a sentiment that your clients would echo this evening.
100%. And Sigrid beautifully said, yes, and we echo that 100%. And with that, I'm going to have to excuse myself. Thank you so much for having me today.
Lisa Bloom, thank you very much for speaking to us there. Lisa Bloom, a lawyer who's represented several of Jeffrey Epstein's victims. Just to remind you of the news that we broke some time ago now, that Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty on 5 counts of the 6 charges that she was faced. On count 6 of sex trafficking of a minor, she was found guilty. On count 5, sex trafficking conspiracy, guilty. On the 4th count, transporting a minor with the intent to engage in illegal sexual activity, guilty. On count 3, conspiracy to transport minors to travel to engage in illegal sexual activity, guilty. On count 2, enticing a minor to travel with the intent to engage in illegal sexual activity, the jury found Ghislaine Maxwell not guilty. And on the 1st count, conspiracy to entice minors to travel across state lines with the intent of engaging in illegal sexual activity, the jury found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty. So guilty on 5 of those 6 counts. We are looking at the steps outside the court in New York at the moment. Believe that we will be hearing from the Maxwell family. That has been the belief throughout the course of the evening, that they will come out on those steps. Microphones are set up outside and give us their response to those guilty verdicts. We've previously been speaking to a journalist who's been in touch with Ghislaine Maxwell via her legal representative today. And she believes from those conversations and conversations that she's had with the Maxwell family that they will be launching an appeal. Her opinion was that they were fully expecting Ghislaine Maxwell to be acquitted this evening and therefore are going to move forward with an appeal. Well, the US Attorney Damian Williams has released the following statement.
A unanimous jury has found Ghislaine Maxwell guilty of one of the worst crimes imaginable, facilitating and participating in the sexual abuse of children, crimes that she committed with her longtime partner and co-conspirator, Jeffrey Epstein. The road to justice has been far too long, but today, justice has been done. I want to commend the bravery of the girls, now grown women, who stepped out of the shadows and into the courtroom Their courage and willingness to face their abuser made today's result in this case possible. I also want to thank the career prosecutors of the Southern District of New York who embraced the victim's quest for justice and have worked tirelessly day in and day out to ensure that Maxwell was held accountable for her crimes. This office will always stand with victims, will always follow the facts wherever they lead, and will always fight to ensure that no one, no matter how powerful or well-connected, is above the law. Thank you.
US Attorney Damian Williams there reading out his statement. Well, let's take you back to New York now, outside the court where our correspondent Martha Kellner has been all evening. Martha, what can you tell us at this stage? We're still waiting for the Maxwell family to give a statement.
Ghislaine Maxwell actually left the court through a side entrance. They said that they were going to make a statement later. We're not sure whether they will return here or whether instead we'll just be speaking with the lawyers, the defence lawyers for Ghislaine Maxwell. So we're waiting to see who, if anyone, turns up to address what you can see as throngs of media outside the Thurgood Marshall Courthouse. But certainly I've just seen Ghislaine Maxwell's close friend Leah Saffin, who's a trained lawyer, although not acting as a legal representative in this case. She's just left and jumped into a waiting people carrier, but she didn't say anything to myself and others who were asking her questions about Ghislaine Maxwell's reaction to this verdict that's found her guilty of 5 of the 6 charges against her. Sentencing, we're told, will take place at a later date, although that date hasn't been set yet. But it's clearly fair to assume that sentencing will take place in the new year, and that Ghislaine Maxwell very probably faces spending the rest of her life behind bars. So we're not quite sure where the Maxwell family have gone, but certainly they looked very dejected as they left court and said they would be making some form of statement later. Just to quickly run you through those charges again, it's important to reflect the breadth of those charges, very complicated. She was found guilty of 3 conspiracy charges. She was found not guilty of enticing a minor to travel with intent to engage in illegal sex acts. She was found guilty of transporting a minor with the intent to engage in criminal sexual activity. Ghislaine Maxwell also found guilty of the most serious charge on the charge sheet relating to sex trafficking of a minor. For that charge alone, she faces up to 40 years in prison. We're not sure whether these sentences will be served consecutively or concurrently, but it's fair to say that this is a disastrous result for Ghislaine Maxwell and her defence team.
Martha, thank you. I want to end on the words of Robert Glassman. He's a lawyer for one of Maxwell's accusers. The verdict screams loud and clear: if you make it easier for another to sexually abuse children, you too will be held accountable for your role in that abuse. The strong women survivors of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein's abuse can all sleep better tonight, knowing that the justice system got it right.